there's good news today. The world is still standing. We're all alive. Europe is still around. Asia is still around. The United States is still going along. Despite all the things you read in the news, this is a good day. But dozens of new pro-life bills are advancing in state legislatures. And nowhere is the debate more critical and drawing more attention than the state of Ohio.
A move is underway there to protect babies based on a heartbeat. But as Charlene Israel explains, this is even creating division among some in the pro-life movement.
Ohio is known for being a barometer of many national issues, ranging from presidential candidates to the economy. Now you can add abortion to that list. Here in Ohio, lawmakers are considering something called the heartbeat bill. It would ban abortions on fetuses once a heartbeat is detected. If it's signed into law here, it would be the most protective pro-life law in the nation. Janet Folger Porter of the pro-life group Faith to Action.
This will save 95% of the babies who would otherwise be aborted. In Ohio, that translates to 26,000 babies every single year.
In Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court gave women the right to an abortion until their fetus is viable or able to live outside the womb. It's only at the point of viability that the ruling allows states to restrict abortion. Heartbeats can be detected as early as 18 days into a pregnancy, and by 6 weeks in most cases. One doctor gave us her opinion of the medical significance behind this bill. From a physician's perspective, the verbiage of the heartbeat bill makes perfect sense. A detectable heartbeat is the critical parameter that signifies life for every patient. As an obstetrician, I'd look for a heartbeat on every ultrasound performed, as it identifies life. That's the key of the bill successfully championed in the Ohio House by Lynn Watchman.
The protection of life with this heartbeat bill is a big step towards asking our federal courts or U.S. Supreme Court to take another look at Roe versus Wade.
That constitutional challenge is the goal of many pro-life Americans.
I just feel like we're here in a time of great destiny, that a nation could turn, literally, because of what is happening here.
I'm here to just support God's vision for not only Ohio, but for our nation and our world.
A handful of abortion activists protested outside the Heartbeat Bill rally.
It's going to mire our state in millions of dollars in debt at a time where we can't afford it.
But it's not just pro-choice groups speaking out against this legislation.
There are very prominent members of the pro-life community that are not sold on the strategy.
State Senator Peggy Lehner, who spent 40 years fighting abortion, is concerned about potential legal challenges.
Is the Supreme Court really ripe for this decision? And I think that's an important question to ask, because if you throw something at the court before they're ready for it, you run the risk of it becoming a Roe being reaffirmed once again.
The Ohio chapter of the National Right to Life also has doubts, but would only tell CBN News,
we just don't think it's the right time for it. So okay.
Others agree. Johanna Dastiel is with the American Life League.
I think that the idea behind it is notable, and we agree with the idea that we should humanize the preborn child in order to win back their rights.
Dastiel says the overall strategy is flawed because the bill only protects babies whose heartbeats can be detected. She believes all babies should be protected.
We diverge from this bill because while it does point to the heartbeat as an indicator of life, it also provides that it's a qualifier for being protected, and that's why we can't support it.
Despite divisions within the pro-life community, many in the state believe the time is now for the beating hearts of babies to be protected.
As we humble ourselves, as we pray, as we turn from our wicked ways, we're going to see God hear from heaven and forgive our sins. And I believe, as we've heard the motto again and again already today, that with God all things are possible.
Charlene Israel, CBN News, Columbus, Ohio.
What do they say? The perfect's the enemy of the good. You know, these diehards who just insist on having everything the way they want it before they will approve something, I think are making a mistake. Here's an opportunity in Ohio to make a huge, huge move for life. I mean, fetal heartbeat is a pretty restrictive thing, and you see some of these abortion clinics and abortion doctors, like that one out in Kansas, they were doing abortions up to the 7th and 8th month. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so now you've got fetal heartbeat, and Ohio could lead the way. So I'm all for it, you know. And then later on, if somebody comes along and says, okay, well, let's have an amendment. But the idea of an amendment to the Constitution is virtually impossible. So for the pro-life movement, get what you can get, and then take that and then move on. Lee Webb has the rest of our top stories in the CBN Newsroom. Lee?
Pat, a new sign of trouble for the European Union. The British Parliament held a vote to let the British people decide whether or not to break ties with the EU. The idea was defeated, but it reflects growing concern in the UK. The Guardian newspaper reports about 70% of Brits want a referendum on the EU, and about half of them would vote to end membership in the organization. Meanwhile, European leaders continue to search for a solution to the massive debt crisis on the continent. German leader Angela Merkel wants to increase the EU's bailout power to nearly $1.4 trillion. That's because she's expecting, Pat, more trouble from nations like Italy and Spain.
The EU is something that just isn't working. And it's a straitjacket around some of these nations that they don't like. This idea of a common currency seemed like a good thing. And I'm sure many merchants are enjoying it because they get paid in euros, and the pricing of their products is in euros across a great quantity of land. So they like that. But at the same time, you've got Berlusconi screaming that you can't tell me how to run Italy, and the Greeks are in some serious trouble. Portugal is in trouble. Spain may be going under next and looking for a financial bailout. And you know, in the old days, they would have a peseta, they would have a drachma, whatever they would have, and they could let that float according to the goodness of their own economy. And if the economy wasn't working, the value of their currency would go down. Well, now they've got one common currency, and it's a straitjacket a lot of people don't like. So we'll see what happens. But as far as some great monolith that fulfills biblical prophecy, at least for now, it ain't happening. Lee?
President Obama is blaming Congress for America's economic problems. He did that while unveiling a plan to help struggling homeowners. The plan will make it easier to qualify for mortgage refinancing. The president will bypass Congress and issue an executive order mandating the new plan. The president says the order is necessary because Congress is, quote, increasingly dysfunctional and isn't doing its job. Many analysts are skeptical of the plan, though. Mr. Obama, though, says millions of Americans could benefit from the measure. What do you think, Pat?
Let's face it. The Democrats controlled the House of Representatives. They controlled the Senate. They controlled the White House. That's it. They could have done anything just about they wanted to. And they spent all their time with this monstrous health care bill, which is a disaster, an utter disaster. And then they brought on Dodd-Frank, which is another disaster in the financial scene. They had plenty of time. Don't talk about them being dysfunctional. He's pointing a finger at his own party. And he's trying to play Harry Truman. And Harry Truman, you know, campaigned on a whistle stop. He rode a train around the country talking about the do-nothing Congress. Well, the Congress is saying, Mr. Obama, what you're suggested isn't going to work, and we're not for it. But why should they be? The last stimulus package, they passed it, and it didn't work, and it was huge. And this new stimulus package is ill-conceived. And so they can't, in their own Senate, it hadn't even gotten to the House yet, and the Senate is basically controlled by the Democrats. They still can't get enough votes to get it through. So the president is treading on dangerous ground when he starts attacking his own party. Lee?
Pat, the Texas Rangers are now up 3-2 in the World Series, and it may have been a communications problem that led to the Texas win. Bases loaded in the bottom of the 8th, game tied at 2. The Rangers' Mike Napoli drives home 2 runs with that double. The right-handed Napoli was up against a left-hander. That's not the pitcher that Cardinals manager Tony La Russa wanted to face Napoli, but it was so loud that the Cardinals bullpen staff got the wrong pitcher to warm up, and the left-hander had to stay in the game. The series moves back to St. Louis now for Game 6. The Rangers 1 win away from capturing their first World Series crown. Well, it's that time of year when hundreds of hikers and hunters and climbers head out to the wilderness. Some of them get lost or injured, and their rescuers are often from the same elite Air Force unit that saved U.S. troops in war zones. They're known as PJs, and Chuck Holton has their story now from Alaska.
The opening day of deer season is one of the most highly anticipated days of the year for many of America's 12 million hunters. But with so many people in search of a trophy, somebody's bound to get hurt. Depending on where you live, there are many search and rescue options. But if all else fails, the job might fall to some of America's most highly trained first responders, Air Force Pararescue. The 212th Rescue Squadron, based here in Anchorage, Alaska, is one of the busiest rescue forces in the world. Made up of highly trained combat rescue officers and pararescuemen, these guys train on an incredible range of skills to enable them to get in, get people who are in trouble, and get them out to safety.
That when they call us, everyone else has been called and everyone else has said no. Whenever the beeper goes off or the cell phone rings, you never know what you're going to get. Whether it's jumping in out of an airplane, flying in from a helicopter, or swimming in from a waterborne vessel to rescue or recover remains or sensitive material.
All those skills come in handy as well when they go off to their real jobs in Iraq and Afghanistan. In the war zone, rescues take on greater urgency when combined with enemy fire. They go by the call sign Pedros, and these saviors from the sky are more than just an air ambulance. What sets them apart is their willingness to go into the hottest landing zones with guns blazing if necessary.
We go in with guns on our aircraft and fully armed. We're a combat force. We can actually fight to our objective, secure it, and then come back.
The incredible pace in Afghanistan means these men all have plenty of combat experience. And each of these PJs has to find his own way to work through the stress once he returns home.
I think one of the most difficult things about coming back is just kind of transitioning back into a family life, you know, as a dad and as a husband. You know, somebody's in rush hour traffic, and to them that's the most important thing in the world, is getting home when you've been overseas, you know, pulling soldiers off the front line or dealing with, you know, dead Americans. And I think that's one of the hardest aspects, is just people in their everyday lives. They don't understand, you know, what we deal with overseas on a day-to-day basis.
Over the last decade, Air Force pararescuemen have constantly been in harm's way, responding to help their brothers on the ground. In the process, more than 10 airmen have died in the line of duty. This sacrifice underscores the depth of their commitment to live up to the pararescue motto, that others may live. From Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Fascinating. Great American heroes, Pat.
They really are. And again, I reinforce what that man said. It's so hard for people at home to understand what the stresses they're going through. And a lot of them don't want to talk about it. And if they do talk, people, they say, well, you know, all they hear about is, I'm interested in what kind of music is playing, what kind of TV is on, and whether I got a good dinner tonight, or whether the shopping is having a sale at some department store. And these guys are dealing with life and death. And it's very difficult. And so people at home, wives and families and others, you need to do everything you can to familiarize yourself with the stresses those men are under. But thank goodness they're using those skills at home to help rescue people in the woods and the mountains who are in difficulty.
What an amazing group.
It's beautiful.
Incredible.
Chuck Holton, again, did a magnificent job.
The president of Kazakhstan has approved a bill tightening registration rules for faith groups. The law has been described by critics as a blow to religious freedom in the ex-Soviet nation. Religious extremism has been an issue there since a series of Islamic attacks over the summer. The law will require existing religious organizations in the mainly Muslim nation to dissolve and re-register. That could make it extremely difficult on small Christian communities. The bill also bans prayer in the workplace. Islamic extremists have executed another Christian in Nigeria. This comes less than 3 months after the murder of a pastor by the radical group Boko Haram. The latest killing involves 36-year-old evangelist Mark Ojunta. He was ministering in Nigeria's northeastern state with Calvary Ministries when he was killed. Compass Direct News reports that Ojunta and his family found out they were on a hit list back in August. Ojunta safely evacuated his family, but he decided to return to the area to teach a class to Christian believers. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.